day started off normally enough. As the fire lookout assigned to Tower 11 in Ironbark State Park, my morning routine was familiar and comforting. I set up my equipment, checked in with Connor from Tower 12 over the radio, and took in the stunning views that stretched out before me. The air was crisp, the sky clear, a perfect day in the wilderness. Little did I know that this day would turn into a living nightmare. As evening approached, a thin column of smoke caught my eye to the north. Illegal campfires were a serious concern, especially in a park like this, so I contacted Connor for confirmation. Armed with my flashlight and talkie, I ventured into the forest. The deeper I went, the more dense foliage seemed to swallow the fading daylight. As the darkness grew, so did the feeling of unease that settled in the pit of my stomach. Then, out of nowhere, a scream tore through the silence. This wasn't the scream of an animal. It was a man, and he was in agony. My heart raced, and every instinct screamed at me to turn back. But my duty compelled me to move forward, to find the source of the scream and offer help. I broke into a run, my flashlight beam bobbing wildly in the darkness as I navigated through the dense underbrush. The scream echoed again, closer and closer. My heart pounded in my chest as I burst through the trees, only to find an abandoned campsite. There was a machete lying in the dirt, a lantern still flickering with a weak dying flame, and scattered camping gear tossed haphazardly around. But no people, no signs of life at all. I called out, hoping for a response, but the only answer I received was the oppressive silence of the forest. A deep sense of dread settled over me. This wasn't right. Something terrible had happened here, something that left the air thick with fear. I quickly radioed Connor, my voice shaking as I described what I'd found. He tried to reassure me, saying it was probably just an animal that made the noise, but I knew better. That scream was human, and it was filled with unimaginable pain. I wanted to get back to the tower, to the safety of my lookout post, but something stopped me. A gnawing curiosity, or maybe it was a sense of duty, pushed me to keep moving forward. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew I hadn't found it yet. After passing through the forest, I stumbled upon another clearing. This one was different, unnatural. In the center was a crude stone table about 3 meters long. Curiosity got the better of me, and I approached it, shining my flashlight. My breath caught in my throat as the beam revealed fresh, crimson blood still pooling and dripping from the stone. Looking closer, in the middle of the table was a strange, unfamiliar symbol, etched deep into the stone and smeared with blood. My blood turned to ice as I realized what I was looking at. This was no ordinary campsite. This was a place of ritual, and not the harmless kind. Suddenly, I heard voices, many voices chanting in unison. The words were foreign, a language I couldn't comprehend. My pulse quickened as I followed the sound, inching closer until I was hidden behind a thick cluster of bushes. There they were, figures cloaked in black robes, their faces concealed by hoods. They were performing some sort of ritual around the stone table. My eyes widened as I caught sight of a man's severed head, his brown hair matted with blood, eyes frozen in an expression of sheer terror. Wisps of smoke curled up around him, adding an eerie glow to the scene. In a panic, I fumbled for my phone and snapped a few photos, desperate to capture the evidence. But the flash betrayed me. One of the cult members spun around, eyes locking onto me. He shouted something and the others began to advance. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized I had just become their next target. I didn't think. I just ran. The forest seemed to close in around me, the branches clawing at my clothes as I sprinted through the underbrush. My breath came in ragged gasps, and I could hear the cult members behind me, their footsteps pounding the earth as they gave chase. My heart was racing, my legs burning, but I couldn't afford to slow down. I wasn't familiar with this part of the park. Every turn felt wrong. Every path looked the same. In the darkness, I was disoriented and desperate. I finally reached a small hill and slid down its side. Crouching behind a thick bush, I pressed myself into the dirt, trying to make myself as small and as quiet as possible. My entire body shook with fear as I listened to the footsteps of the cultists grow closer, and then mercifully, they began to fade. I held my breath, daring to hope that I had lost them. The forest was silent again, save for the pounding of my heart in my ears. After what felt like an eternity, I finally allowed myself to exhale. I knew I couldn't stay here. I had to get the hell out of the park. Just as I was about to move, the crackle of my radio shattered the silence. Connor's voice came through, loud and clear, asking for an update. The sound echoed through the still night, impossibly loud. My blood ran cold as I realized what had just happened. Before I could react, I heard footsteps rapidly approaching. From behind me, I matched with Ron on Tinder a few days ago. His profile was sparse, just a few pictures and no bio. Despite that, I found myself intrigued by his appearance. After a few exchanges, he invited me over to his place. 2 red flags already, no bio and an immediate invite to his house. But he assured me he wasn't a catfish. I suggested we meet for a drink first. That way, if things went south, I could make a quick exit. When I saw him at the pub, I was blown away. Ron had the flashy, polished appearance of a silver screen star from a bygone era. Dressed in a stylish trench coat, his striking blue eyes gleamed under the dim light. As I moved in for a hug, he redirected me to a firm handshake, his thick winter gloves feeling odd given the roaring fireplace nearby. We ordered drinks, Guinness for me, tap water for him, and started talking about our lives. When I mentioned my job in IT, he yawned sarcastically. "What do you do then?" I asked, chuckling. "I'm between jobs," he said. "Between what and what?" "Between a surgeon and anything that doesn't involve bodily fluids," he replied, his tone darkening as he mentioned a traumatizing experience in medical school. He quickly changed the subject. "Anyway, let's talk about your sex life." Caught off guard, I spit out my Guinness. He cleaned up the mess with a wet wipe from his pocket and then meticulously aligned the placemats and ashtray. Ron mentioned he had some kinks, which made my heart race a little. He asked if I was ready for another drink, and I was, although I sipped it slowly, mindful of my low alcohol tolerance. "Don't take this the wrong way, but are you real? What's the catch here? Am I going to wake up tomorrow missing a kidney?" He chuckled. "I'll be honest, there is a catch, but promise you won't make fun of me?" I crossed my heart. Leaning in close, he whispered, "I'm a clean freak. If you come back to my place tonight, I need you to wash yourself the second we get there. Those clothes will need cleaning too. I have a fresh pair you can borrow, and you must brush your teeth. Also, do you have an earwax remover? If not, you can borrow one from my kit." I asked if he was serious. "Deadly. I can't stand filth. I need you spotless. Sounds good?" Feeling like I'd hit the lottery, I agreed. In his car, Ron handed me a breath mint, probably because of the lingering scent of my aunt's cottage pie on my breath. He drove us to a modern house on the edge of a forest, its sterile white exterior contrasting sharply with the surrounding pine trees. The moment we stepped inside, the smell of disinfectant stung my nose. The place was immaculate, like something out of an IKEA catalogue. Everything was covered in plastic, and 2 stuffed kittens stood guard on the landing. "Adorable, aren't they?" Ron said when he caught me staring. His universe was shrink-wrapped in cleanliness. I kicked off my shoes and followed him to the bathroom. He watched as I stripped, his neutral expression stinging. sealed my clothes in a Ziploc bag and handed me specific soap and shampoo. Fighting the urge to be sarcastic, I stepped into the shower. In the lounge, he handed me a shot of something fruity and sour. We clinked glasses, and I took a seat on the slick plastic sofa. Almost immediately, my head grew heavy, and the air became stale. I fell to the floor, and everything went blurry. I struggled to stay conscious, my brain unable to piece together what was happening. When I looked down, Ron was grinning wickedly, wrapping my legs in shrink wrap like an Egyptian mummy. "Shh, this won't take long," he said, straddling me. His lips brushed my ear. "I'm going to take care of you. You look so handsome, all lovely and spotless. I'm just making sure you stay that way. Forever." His tongue slid into my ear. "And bite." He bited me. He gently wiped the blood from his lips as if he had just savored a delicious meal, then left to fetch medical equipment. Panic surged through me. I needed to escape. I struggled, but Ron's grip on my ankles tightened. "Stop it! You're messing everything up." With all my strength, I rolled off the bed, hitting the wooden floor hard. I opened my mouth to groan, but instead a torrent of vomit erupted, spraying chunks of cottage pie everywhere. I made it to the kitchen and pulled myself up to the counter, searching for a sharp object. I finally grabbed a knife, stabbing at the wrap until my arm came free. Ron burst into the room, a syringe in hand. He lunged at me, but I caught his forearm, smearing vomit across his face with my other hand. He convulsed violently, dropping the needle. I grabbed a pan and hit his head until he went limp. In the hall, I called 911. The operator struggled to understand me, but dispatched help. My memory blurred, and the next thing I knew, emergency responders were surrounding me. At the hospital, Ron claimed I attacked him, but when police searched the area, they found a decomposed body wrapped in plastic, confirming my story. Ron denies any wrongdoing, but with the evidence, he faces justice. For me, I'm recovering mentally and ready to find love again, this time being careful not to ignore any red flags.
I never expected to become friends with someone like Thomas. As desk buddies, our conversations were mostly one-sided, with me doing most of the talking. Thomas was shy and strangely odd, but over time, he began to open up. He smiled more often, though there was something unsettling about his smile that I couldn't quite shake. One day, out of the blue, Thomas invited me to his house for a sleepover. I hesitated at first, but my curiosity about his mysterious family got the better of me. When I arrived, Thomas's parents greeted me with the same unsettling smiles I had seen on his face. They were overly polite, their eyes too wide, and their voices carrying an unnatural cheerfulness that made my skin crawl. During dinner, I could hardly focus on the food because I kept hearing something odd. A faint, distant crying, as if a child were sobbing somewhere in the house. No one else seemed to notice, and when I mentioned it to Thomas, he just shrugged and told me not to worry. After his parents went to bed, Thomas turned to me with a grin.
"Hey, wanna see my old friend?"
His voice was playful, but there was an edge to it that made my stomach twist. I hesitated, but I didn't want to seem scared. "Sure," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. We tiptoed through the dark hallway, the only light coming from the moon outside. I was most surprised by how the Donovan family seemed to have a thing for collecting mirrors, as they were lined up along the entire hallway. As we approached a large draped object at the end of the hall, the crying I'd heard earlier grew louder. My heart pounded in my chest. This was no trick of the imagination. Thomas stopped and whispered,
"Don't worry if he looks at you, just make sure you look away fast. You'll be fine as long as you look away fast."
I didn't understand what he meant, but before I could ask, he pulled the sheet back, revealing the mirror's intricate carvings. The crying was coming from inside the mirror, but there was no one else in the room. I stared at the glass, trying to make sense of what I was seeing or not seeing. My reflection was missing, replaced by the image of a boy I didn't recognize, standing in the corner of the mirrored space. I wanted to believe it was some sort of optical illusion, but when the boy turned around and started walking toward me, I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. "Thomas, who is that?" But Thomas didn't answer. When the boy's face came into view, I felt my blood turn to ice. His features were stretched and distorted, like those in a funhouse mirror, and his lips twisted into a grotesque smile as he pressed his hands against the glass. Suddenly, his fingers started pushing through the mirror's surface, reaching out toward me. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, as the boy's long, thin arms stretched toward my face.
"Ryan, look away!"
Thomas shouted, grabbing my arm and yanking me back. I stumbled away from the mirror, gasping for breath. I heard a faint giggle from behind the glass as the boy slowly withdrew, his smile never fading.
"We have to go!"
Thomas said urgently, pulling me back down the hall. We rushed back to his room where Thomas quickly locked the door behind us. I wanted to ask a million questions, but the look on Thomas's face told me now wasn't the time. We climbed into bed, but there was no way I could sleep after what I'd just seen. As Thomas's breathing evened out beside me, I knew I couldn't stay in that house. Whatever was in that mirror, it wasn't human. I waited until I was sure Thomas was asleep before quietly slipping out of bed. I tiptoed to the door and carefully opened it. As I crept toward the stairs, just as I reached the top, heavy footsteps echoed behind me. Panicking, I ducked behind the nearest door, peeking through a narrow gap. Mr. Donovan, Thomas's father, marched past, carrying something rectangular under his arm. The faint tinkling of glass reached my ears as he headed toward Thomas's room. My stomach lurched. I didn't want to know what he was planning. Suddenly, I heard Mr. Donovan shout,
"He's gone!"
Panic surged through me. I sprinted through the hallway where I heard the cries of children and the clattering of glass against wood. I finally reached the garage and bolted inside, slamming the door behind me. My hands trembled as I grabbed my bike and wheeled it to the door, pressed the button to open the garage door. Just as I managed to get it open, I saw Mr. Donovan standing in the doorway, his face twisted in anger. For the first time, he wasn't smiling. He rushed toward me. In his rush, he stumbled, and the mirror he carried crashed to the floor, shattering into pieces. The room filled with eerie laughter. When I looked back, I saw long, thin arms reaching out from the broken glass, grasping at Mr. Donovan. The lights flickered wildly as his screams filled the garage, but I didn't stay to watch. I jumped on my bike and pedaled as fast as I could, speeding down the driveway and away from that cursed house.
That was creepy. It was just another quiet evening at home. My wife, Anna, and I were lounging on the couch, scrolling through our phones. Anna stumbled upon a new trend on TikTok, and her face lit up with that mischievous smile I knew so well. Anna loved playing pranks, and I was often her favorite target. She just laughed, that glint of mischief still in her eyes.
I know, right? Creepy, but kind of funny too. Want to try something like that?
I chuckled nervously. No thanks, I'm not a fan of this stuff. Anna shrugged, standing up and stretching.
Suit yourself. I thought it was pretty fun.
I watched her walk into the kitchen, her footsteps echoing softly. Anna always loved a good scare, but this felt different. As the evening wore on, I settled back into my chair, trying to focus on a book. The house was quiet, and I found myself glancing up every few minutes, half expecting Anna to jump out and startle me. But she didn't. The silence stretched on, almost unnaturally so. I got up, deciding to find her, and suggested we watch something light before bed. As I walked down the hallway, I frozen. There in the dim light, I saw a figure standing at the end of the hall. It was Anna, but she looked different. Her posture was rigid, her face partially obscured by her hair. And that smile, wide, fixed and unnerving, was exactly like the woman in the video. I took a cautious step forward, but she didn't move. "Come on, Anna, stop joking. This isn't funny," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Still nothing. The air around us felt thick, oppressive. I took another step, my heart pounding. "Anna, please, you're scaring me." Then she moved, not towards me, but slowly down the hall. Gathering all the courage I had left, I followed her, my footsteps echoing in the quiet house. When I reached the top of the stairs, I saw the bedroom door ajar. I pushed the door open slowly. Anna stood in the middle of the room, her back to me. Her shoulders were tense and her hands were clenched into fists at her sides. "Anna, please, stop this. You're really scaring me," I pleaded, my voice barely a whisper. She turned slowly, her movements unnaturally stiff. Her eyes. I've never seen eyes like that. They were hungry, predatory. I stumbled back, my heart racing. "Stay away! Please, stay away!" I shouted, panic flooding my chest. But she kept coming, that smile never wavering. I turned and ran. I bolted down the stairs, my mind a whirlwind of terror. I had to get out. I stopped dead in my tracks as I heard a noise from the yard. I didn't want to look, but something compelled me to move towards the back door, leading to the yard. In the darkness, I saw Anna standing there, her back to me again. But what made my blood run cold was what she was holding in her hands. A dead rat. Anna bent down and took a bite out of the rat's corpse, blood and fur splattering everywhere. I watched in horror as the scene unfolded, my stomach churning. She looked up, her eyes bloodshot, and that smile, wider than ever, with blood dripping down the corners of her mouth. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't face whatever this thing was that wasn't Anna. Without hesitation, I turned and bolted out the front door. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the knob. When I finally got the door open, I glanced back. Anna stood there in the doorway watching me, that smile still etched on her face. I didn't wait any longer. I sprinted out into the night, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't stop until I reached the car, fumbling with the keys in my pocket. As I started the engine and sped away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. She was standing there in the doorway, her silhouette stark against the light. And that smile, that terrifying, unnatural smile. I don't know what happened to my wife. I don't know if she was possessed or if it was some prank gone horribly wrong. All I know is that I can't go back. That smile burned into my memory, haunts me every time I close my eyes. And the worst part is, I can't stop smiling.